Welcome to the 2020 Bushwalking New South Wales Annual General Meeting, presented by Bill Boyd, President of Bushwalking New South Wales, with guest presenter Linda Groom from Canberra Bushwalking Club and the Reclaim Kosci campaign, who will talk on Kosciuszko National Park, highs and horses. Over to you, Bill.
Look, it's 7:31 and Bruce, our secretary, is taking the minutes, and we're recording this as well. We should have told you that, but you can record a Zoom meeting so that we've got a record of Linda's talk when we get there, and it helps us with the minutes and just keeping our records as clean and proper as possible. So I'd like to open the meeting formally. I'd like to welcome all of you. Those I've talked to, those I haven't, I apologize if I've missed you out. Thank you very much for coming along, and well done everybody for getting onto Zoom. For some of you, if it's a first time thing, I hope you find that you can make good use of it. For those of you familiar with it, you'll realize what the power of this medium is. It would be lovely to be seeing you all face to face, but we're going to be seeing some of you that wouldn't make it to a face-to-face meeting. We've got a list of the attendees. Did we have any apologies? Kirsten, you've got a list of apologies of people who've informed you.
No apologies informed.
We haven't had any yet, that's fine. You've got a list of the delegates. I won't necessarily go through the whole list. And we've got one or two visitors. We've got Linda Groom's support team, which is lovely to see. And I've already heard we've got one or two members who are not delegates, but are just interested in being here. So thank you very much for coming. Probably a couple of little housekeeping matters. Kirsten has probably alerted you to these in other forums, but as the proceedings go, if you would make sure that your microphone is muted, Kirsten can control that centrally, but if you at some point do want to ask a question or make a comment, and there's a couple of points in the meetings when that's relevant, I think you can best put things in the chat, and we'll try and keep on top of the chat box and ask the questions for you. I would ask you, if you might, we've got a very tight timeline. So when it comes to the point where you might have a question, can you try to compose it as a single sentence? And can you try to ensure it's a question, not a statement? I know that you are all active people. You probably have views on the world, and so you should. But it doesn't, if we can respect all the rest of us, give everyone a chance to have a say. Keep your questions or comments very tight and brief. That would be wonderful. If we run out of time for questions on some matters, you're more than welcome to email them, put them in the chat box, or email them to us, and we can follow them up should that be necessary. Before we get started, I do want to acknowledge the country that we're all sitting on. We're all aware, we're fully familiar with the land that we bushwalk in, and we know that that land is Indigenous land. It always has been, always will be, and that we are merely passing through land that has been in the custodial care of our Indigenous fellow citizens. And I just want to acknowledge that wherever we are in the state, we acknowledge that land, and we acknowledge the elders, past, present, and emerging, who care for that land. Let's move on. I'm sure you're not here to listen to me. I would think it's more likely you've come to listen to our guest speaker, Linda Groom. Now, Linda, some of you will know, you'll know from the advertising, is a remarkable person. I'm sure she might blush if I say so, but I've heard a lot about her achievements. She was, and remains, I suppose, the 2019 recipient of Bushwalking New South Wales Chardon Award. We will find out at the end of this meeting who the 2020 recipients, that's a giveaway, are. But for the moment, I'd just like to congratulate Linda yet again and acknowledge the Chardon Award is an award that Bushwalking New South Wales gives each year to a person who's made a significant contribution to bushwalking in New South Wales in some way or another. We don't tie down the rules. We acknowledge all sorts of contributions. It was named after one of the founders of Bushwalking New South Wales. Keith, you'll correct me, but 1932? Just put your thumb up if I'm right, or down if I'm wrong.
Let's stop the mute. 1932, Harold Chardon called all the clubs together as a respected member from Sydney Bushwalkers. And from that meeting, the New South Wales Federation of Bushwalking Clubs was formed. So he was the mid-husband for Bushwalking New South Wales.
That's very good. Thank you, Keith. And so perhaps just looking forward a bit, it's only 12 years away and many of us will still be around to celebrate the centenary. So there's a little promise of something wonderful that we haven't started planning, but if anybody would like to join, you're more than welcome. Anyway, be that as it may, Linda is the recipient of the Chardon Award. And one of the reasons, not the only one, but one of the reasons she was, is her role in creating the very public demonstration regarding the Brumbies on Kosciuszko, the saving the national park, the most important and iconic national park and wilderness area that we have. She, as a member of Canberra Bushwalking Club, I presume is very familiar with that area, and she organised a walk. I think I made a note here, am I right in saying 560 kilometres from Sydney to the top? I gather there were 5 people who walked the entire, and many more people who joined along the way. And before I give anything more away about that, I'd like to welcome Linda Groom as our keynote speaker to talk to us on a title I've been given, Kosciuszko National Park, Highs and Horses. Over to you, Linda.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you very much, Bill.
And I'll just acknowledge that we have one of those five walkers in the audience here.
Linda.
Sorry, we need to mute your other phone. Can you please?
Sorry, Linda.
Yeah, can you mute it, Kirsten? So, yeah. Okay, does that sound better now? Yeah. Okay, so Paul Milgate's here in the audience wearing his yellow Save Kosci vest. He was one of the 5 walkers. So I'm just going to share my screen now. So this will just take a couple of seconds. Okay, so this is going to be an update on the Reclaim Kosci project. The aim of the Reclaim Kosci campaign is to protect Kosciuszko National Park from feral horse damage. I'm going to give you a very quick recap of some of the history and then an update in more detail about the last several months. I'm going to have a short digression towards the end with some campaign gossip. And then at the very end, I'm going to go on down on my knees and beg you to put in submissions when the draft for the feral horse management plan comes out. So I'm going to approach the issue from a bushwalkery point of view, I guess. Let me see. I want to go to the next.
Right.
Yep. Okay. So I'm a bushwalker, as you guessed. I do not like walking through this kind of stuff. And I do not like having to get my water from a horse-trampled stream like this one near Bill Jones' huts on the 8AWT. I much prefer walking in this kind of untrampled, beautiful country. And when I go to Kosciuszko in summer, I like to see flowers that are not eaten down by grazing animals. These ones, the anemone buttercups, almost went extinct when grazing was permitted in the national park. And as horses are returning to the alpine areas, they're in danger again. In summary, I just don't like seeing Kosciuszko National Park looking like this. So as Bill mentioned, I decided on a bushwalkery solution and organised a protest walk, which started in Sydney in November 2018, and walked all 560 kilometres over 36 days to the top of Kosciuszko. After that protest walk was over, we concentrated on a petition and collected petition signatures in all sorts of bushwalkery places, including Charlotte Pass. It got to the point where you couldn't even go canyoning without being asked to sign a petition. That petition was presented in August 2019, and I think that was the first time when Matt Keane was speaking in Parliament that he came out quite strongly in support of what we were seeking. Another strand of the campaign has been more refined and artistic. We've been asking people to create artworks and craft works that capture the species that are threatened by the horses in Kosciuszko National Park. So that's one by Gillian Carter. This is a delightful watercolour of a broad-toothed mouse. All sorts of media. This is a hand-sewn material collage of the alpine striped sun orchid. And some of the craft works are actually three-dimensional representations of the threatened flowers. So that's what we were doing up until this last summer. And then, as you all know, this is what happened. So the aftermath of the bushfires, they were really quite severe. That's an aerial view of Selwyn. In the aftermath, the horses survived reasonably well. According to the National Parks and Wildlife Service, 75% of the horse habitat in Kosciuszko was not affected by the fires. And of the remaining area, horses often were only partially affected. But the native animals didn't survive quite so well. They had to compete for the grass. This poor little wallaby is nowhere near any nice, nutritious grass, and the horses are monopolising it. So in response to that, in concern for the wildlife, the Environment Minister, Matt Keane, proposed to remove feral horses from 3 high priority areas in northern Kosciuszko at Nunga Plain, Coolaman Plain, and near the Canberra area. Of course, then COVID-19 intervened, but in July, the horse removal started to happen, mostly by rehoming, but some horses are sent to a knackery. And about 100 horses have gone so far. So that's a good step in the right direction, but a very tiny number compared to what really need to be removed to remove the damage. At the same time in July, we were active in other fronts. There was a by-election in Eden Monero. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried to influence an environmental issue at an election time by handing out scorecards. We decided that that didn't work very well at the state elections last year. So this time we concentrated not so much on the voters, but on the influential people who turn up at polling booths. So that photo shows the actual Liberal candidate getting given the full spiel by one of the Reclaim Kosci volunteers. One of our brave helpers also took on Robert Borsak, the leader of Shooters, Farmers and Fishers. She's smiling in that photo. I think it's a bit more of a grimace than a smile. There were all sorts of amazing people that we harangued. This is Fred Niles' wife, who surprisingly seemed to be very interested and supportive. And so that was our effort to soften up some politicians and influencers during the July election campaign. Meanwhile, the Brumby advocates were quite busy with court cases. Excuse me. So you probably heard there was a court case in Victoria. 2 court cases in Victoria, the second one brought by a cattleman, Phil Maguire, and 1 court case in New South Wales. And all of those court cases were thrown out, or dismissed is the technical term, allowing the Victorian and New South Wales governments to continue with culling process. But Phil Maguire has decided to take his case to the High Court. He is seeking leave to appeal at the High Court, which will take several months for a decision on whether that will be successful. In the meantime, he's seeking an injunction to prevent any removal or culling in Victoria, and we don't know what the outcome of that is at the moment. So from the lofty area of the High Court, where everything is sane and calm, I'm now going to divert into a little bit of campaign gossip. So last month, a Brumby supporter started putting up these posters. Which were factually wrong and rather insulting. I mean, it's well past July and every single Brumby has not gone. The person who was putting up the posters went under the Facebook name of Rachel Arlington. And after these rather offensive posters went up, she put up a post, and I'm sorry, this is full of text, but in this post, she was proposing to dump deceased horse parts on the front of Matt Keane's lawn. Excuse me, I just got to have a cough here. So that seemed, well, rather absurd. The police were called and they went to visit the person who lives near Gosford. And the person they visited, whom they thought was Rachel Arlington, denied all knowledge. Said, you know, no, that wasn't me. I'm not Rachel Arlington. My first name happens to be Rachel, but I know nothing of this. And then a journalist got the address and visited the same person. And here's more text, I'm sorry, but this is the journalist's account. It's a little bit boring to read, but it actually is quite funny at the end. So I'll let you read it. Just give you a minute. So basically what the post says is the journalist turned up, Rachel Wall denied all knowledge, and then Rachel Arlington posted that night that a journalist had turned up on her doorstep. So she outed herself. And when the journalist alerted to that, the post went straight down. So that's the kind of quality of person. I wish all the rest of the Brumby advocates were perhaps not quite as bright as that. Some of them are quite bright, so that's not so good. So that was the gossip diversion. Now I'll get back to the more serious stuff. No. Sorry, I just got it. Here we go. The big event coming up in this campaign in the next few months will be the call for submissions on the draft feral horse management plan, which is being put together by, drafted by 2 advisory panels at the moment. We don't have an exact date for this, but sometime before the end of the year. I have written to every New South Wales, Bushwalking New South Wales member club with this plea, please put in a submission. We've been offering a submission guide and quite a few clubs have said yes. We've also been writing to a number of other organisations offering the submission guide. So this is a list of all the organisations, including bushwalking clubs, that have said, yes, okay, you can send us a submission guide. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll put in a submission, but it's a good start. You can see there we have all sorts of unusual organisations like the Australian Orchid Foundation. And I hope you'll, excuse me, I hope if you haven't said yes yet, that your club will consider saying yes to at least receiving a submission guide. This is my final plea coming up. This is our last big chance to influence the way this issue goes. So please put in a submission, because we really want Kosciuszko to look like this and not to look like a horse paddock. And at that point, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Linda. That was wonderful. Maybe if you could share your screen and we can have everyone up on the screen again. And we've got a couple of minutes, and I would invite, if somebody has any question, if you could maybe just type it into the chat box and I'll read it out and we can see. Look, Linda, I was going to say wonderful work you're doing, but it's such a situation. And as we all know, that whatever side of an issue on, there are people on the other side with equally strong views, and brumbies and horses will always elicit strong emotions. So it's quite a job you've got. I've got Lawrence asking us, any guess on the number of brumbies in the Kosciuszko National Park?
Yes, Lawrence. Well, there was an aerial survey last year. It was a sampling survey, so it involved observation plus then extrapolation, and that looked like about 19,000 in Kosciuszko National Park. Quite an increase, about 20-something% a year growth rate. The Brumby advocates question the number, but whatever the number is, there are many thousands of horses there and an awful lot of damage. I see a question from you.
Yep, how to request your submission guide.
Yep, I think you're from CMW, is that right? So
yes,
CMW has already enthusiastically said they will accept a submission guide. So that will be passed on by I'm guessing if they choose to make a club submission, that's great. Otherwise, they'll probably pass the submission on to members, to the guide on to members.
I would say to obviously you're interested in the question, make sure you encourage your group to make a submission of their own. Sam has asked, what's your view on how effective the advisory panel has been?
Sam, yes, it's a good question. I think the advisory panel, the community advisory panel, has been split quite heavily between different points of view. I think I don't know that it has been all that effective, but it's just leaning enough towards some action and that has been useful for the Minister to be able to quote. The other panel, the scientific advisory panel, has been much more effective in my view, and more willing to bat things around sensibly, and they've been providing good advice. So it was really the scientific advisory panel that pushed through the emergency action after the bushfires in the 3 priority areas in northern Kosciuszko.
Matt, thank you. Some of you will notice Matt's posted a web link to a media release, which goes back to the issue of the numbers there. And there's a press release there looking at, I've just brought it up, 2014, 6,150. This is estimated horse population, 2019, 20,000 plus. So those of you interested in following that up a little bit more might like to follow that link up. Thank you, Matt. Look, I'm sure that other people have got questions. They now know who you are. We've got one more question. I'll maybe make this the last one and we can move on to our business meeting. From Paul, thank you. Apart from trapping, is there a time frame to adopt other more effective methods to eliminate the feral horses? I'm presuming, Paul, you're thinking in terms of other biological controls, population controls and so forth. Linda, do you have any comment on that?
The main other effective methods, I mean, the trapping is not particularly effective. It's high effort, high cost for fairly low numbers of horses. So the other effective methods are ground shooting and aerial shooting. And for that to come in, that will have to come in via the draft feral horse management plan. If it is influenced by a sufficient number of submissions asking for that, for the Park Service to have a choice of culling methods. It needs to be humanely done. That kind of, any kind of lethal method needs to be humane, or the public just simply won't accept it. But it can be humanely done. So that's our hope, that that will come out of the draft plan.
Thank you, Linda. And Luke, thank you everyone for questions. As I said, I'm sure if you've got any more, you'll find a way of asking Linda, or if you send Bushwalking New South Wales an email, we can pass them on. If you'd like to talk more with Linda and get involved in whichever way, we all have different ways we can get involved in any issues and campaigns. And I'm sure Linda would be delighted to hear from you. Linda, one more time, thank you very much, and belated congratulations on your award last year. It looks like you've got your spare minutes filled for the next few years, unfortunately, but all strength to you. And thank you once again for being our keynote speaker at this AGM.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
I'm just going to try, before we go to our business, and see if any of you can find your reactions button and give Linda either a hand clap or thumbs up. And let's see how many. Yep, a few people are managing. This is wonderful. Oh, look at that. It's so loud with the sound of one hand clapping. There you go. Now, those of you who are new to Zoom, you may have just learned something new. So thank you one more time. Okay, I'd like to move on to our business meeting, and the AGM, as you know, is a formal business. We've got a number of items. You will have seen the agenda there, and you will appreciate the sort of matters we need to do. The first item is that we accept the minutes of the 2019 AGM, and they've been circulated. I hope those of you who are interested in minutes of an older meeting have had a chance to look, and will recognise that that's a record of the last meeting. I have to, before I ask for a motion, a mover and a seconder for the acceptance of them as a true and accurate record of the last AGM, have to acknowledge that, of course, the chair of that was Alex, our previous president, who should have finished his term of office at that meeting. There's a 3-year term, but given an absence of anybody jumping up to take the position, he did continue. He's a busy person, and as you will appreciate, he's not the president anymore, not because we wanted to get rid of him, but because he just made the sensible decision that there are many things to do and only so many things one person can do. So I really want to acknowledge his role. He's been a member, an active member of the management committee for many years, and the president, and so I acknowledge that. I would like to call now for a mover to accept the minutes of the 2019 AGM and a seconder. And I think the cleanest way to do that is if you could write it into the chat box if you'd like to move or second. Bruce has moved, thank you very much, and a seconder. And Matt, thank you very much. We've got 2 seconders, we've got lots of seconders, that's wonderful. And now that we've moved it and seconded it, I'll open up for any discussion. If anybody's got any questions, points of correction or notes to make, could you type it into the chat box and I'll look at that. And just give you a couple of minutes for your typing fingers to get active. I'm looking like there's nothing coming back, so I will take it that we're happy with the minutes as they stand, and I will ask for a vote now. Kirsten, voting, how are we going to do that?
So the request was for people to put their vote in the chat box, as they've been doing.
Okay.
You could, if everybody's comfortable with the reactions, we can also do that as well. If, but I did state before the meeting that we'd use the chat box.
Okay, I think maybe just the easy thing, if there's anybody who wants to
Show
go
of hands.
we've got a number of people who are not on visuals. So look, if you can go to your reactions and put your thumb up for a vote of yes. How about, let's do it that way. And you'll just give us just a few minutes just to, I'm getting quite a few. Yep, everyone's finding it. Kirsten, you're being able to sort of keep a tally there. Now, those that...
Yes, we got a good number of thumbs up.
We've got a majority of thumbs up.
Well, we could ask, you could ask for nay now.
Yep,
see if
so you've
got
the count, Kirsten. So anybody who wishes to oppose the motion. And there being none, I declare that that motion has been passed. Thank you very much.
Was that a nay from Keith? Your thumb came up on my screen, Keith.
Oh, I don't know.
Up, yes, accept.
You're a yes, Keith. Good, thank you. Okay, thanks for spotting that. The next motion is the annual report, which as Kirsten has circulated to you, and we would like to have a motion to accept the annual report. And again, I would like to call in the chat box for somebody to move that motion and somebody to second it. Have we got a mover for accepting the annual report? I'm not seeing anybody yet. I hope we do. I don't know what happens if we don't accept the annual report. John, thank you very much. And is there somebody who will second the acceptance of the annual report? Oh, thank you, Joe, for seconding it. So we have a mover and a seconder. Yeah, I know, Matt, you haven't read it, but I imagine one or two other people haven't. But for those of you who have had a chance to look through it, is there any discussion that you'd like to raise regarding the annual report? Well, I will take that silence to mean that there is no discussion, so I will put the motion. Thanks, Sam. I'll put the motion. Those in favour of accepting the annual report, please hit the reactions button and give us a thumbs up. A few thumbs up coming up, that's good. You're getting a count, Kirsten. Okay, and you're discovering, of course, the thumb only stays up for a while and then it disappears.
Yeah, so I've recorded it on the video as much as I can.
That's good. Yep. Anybody opposed to the motion? I'm doing a quick scan there. I see no thumbs. In that being the case, we will accept the annual report as moved to be accepted. Thank you very much. We have financial report, which is in the annual report. And we have to formally move acceptance of the financial report. I do, before I call for a mover and seconder, I want to acknowledge the work that Peter has done as our treasurer. I do recollect when I was at last year's meeting that Peter very hesitantly said, in the absence of anyone else, yes, he can do that and he'll fill in a gap. And I'll tell you what, he's filled in a great gap. He's brought, without inferring anything about previous treasurers, but brought an order and a discipline that's been wonderful. I've been chair of many committees, and I know that one of the most important things is to have a good treasurer and financial advisor, and I think we're well suited, and it shows in the documents that the committee have had access to, and you do. Having given that little introduction and acknowledged Peter's role as treasurer, thank you. I'd like to call for, again in the chat room, somebody to, thank you, Kirsten, for drawing attention. It's at the end of the annual report. I'd like to call for somebody to move that the meeting accept the financial report for the financial year 2019 to 20. And I do appreciate that financial reports are often things that people tend to gloss over and not read, but we've got David moving it. Thank you, David, and Margaret seconding. Thank you very much. I'd like to open up any discussion about the financial report. Again, if you can make a comment in the chat room if you have any questions or observations to make. And I'm seeing nothing being typed in. I think that being the case, I was just closing it when I apologize. Now, D. McCallum, I don't know your first name. Can someone explain why the insurance broker fee looks like a large percentage of the premium? Why is their fee not included in the premium we pay? Kirsten or Peter, we've had long discussions with insurance, by the way. It's a continuing discussion we have. So would one of you be able to provide an explanation that helps the members?
Sorry, Peter, we need to get you off mute.
Yeah, so where's Peter gone?
Peter, check. Okay, go.
So I would much rather see the brokerage as a separate fee rather than lost in the premiums. As to why it's whatever percentage it is, I don't know what the standard brokerage rate would be. I can't answer that, I'm afraid.
Okay. Now, sorry, McCallum, got you by their second name. Does that help? Okay. Matt, you asked where can we access the report? Yes, Kirsten just posted that web link there for you, for your information. If there are no more comments or questions, I will put the vote to the meeting. It's been moved by David and seconded by Margaret that the meeting accept the financial report for the financial year 2019 to 2020. Can you get your fingers onto that reaction button and let's see some thumbs up if you support the motion? That's looking good. And as there's still a few going up, I'll just give you a moment there to do it, and we watch them dropping off. And is there anybody who wishes to vote against the motion? And I do apologize, I forgot to ask in the previous if there was any abstentions, but I think looks like the motion has been voted in the affirmative, so we've accepted the financial report. And one more time, I do acknowledge Peter's sterling work in getting them in the condition that we're in. The next item on the agenda concerns the Bushwalking New South Wales Inc. Constitution. And I might just introduce this. Over the last little while, the Management Committee have been working on updating the Constitution in a couple of ways. And I had rather hoped we'd reach a point where we'd be able to bring you a draft to this meeting for us to consider and approve. I wasn't confident that it's ready yet. We're almost there. So I'm going to sort of ask you to be patient with us for a month or two more, and we will call a special meeting to approve an updated constitution. But what I'd like to do at this point is just explain that the reason that we do this, I mean, every organization with a constitution, i.e. every organization, it behoves them to ensure that their constitution is as current and up to date as possible. And largely that reflects two primary things. One is that the laws of our land do change, and therefore the requirements, the legal requirements of an incorporated organization will change. And our constitution needs to reflect those legal requirements in their broadest sense. There are also behavioral changes. So for example, over the last 5 or 10 years, and many constitutions have had to be modified to reflect our attitudes towards language, gendered language. Old constitutions were very male gendered oriented. And so we have a social obligation to be contemporary and respectful. The third aspect is that the organization changes, and the way that the organization works and operates has evolved and changed, the way that the membership is constituted and so forth. And so there's a need to ensure that the constitution actually reflects the way the organization wants to be. So for those reasons, we've been looking at the constitution, and I can't recollect off the top of my head the date of the previous one, but it was getting a bit long in the tooth, and there were one or two aspects of it which were just simply out of date, and some which actually were not acceptable. And so we've been working on it. Now, some of you in the audience, and along with other members of Bushwalking New South Wales, have contacted us with commentary. You've seen drafts, you've sent us comments, and I really appreciate that. Kirsten is keeping a master copy of commentary, and everything from those useful little typographic suggestions through to discussions of substance. We do need to get it right. And I really do appreciate the inputs that you've offered. You will all appreciate that at the end of the day, we need to come up with the most relevant 21st century appropriate constitution that serves our needs as a bushwalking organisation. And there will be times when your suggestions may not appear in exactly the form that you might like them, because there'll be other opinions, and we've got to find the balance there. So what I'd like to do with this brief introduction, it was to be, I hoped, an introduction of the draft and a move that we accept it, but we're not ready for that. But what I'd like to do is extend an invitation to you for one last chance for a response to the draft constitution and the documents. Kirsten has been circulating that to clubs. I think, you know, if anybody has any immediate urgent question, if they wanted to type it into the chat group, keep it brief if you wouldn't mind. But otherwise, I do extend an invitation to you to email to Bushwalking New South Wales any comments and thoughts that you have. We always like to get positive feedback, what actually works, as well as more often the things that maybe you feel could be done differently or better. Yep, sorry, John, I'll get back to that. I didn't deliberately skip it. John just asked me an agenda item, which I've forgotten to go to. So it's an invitation for input. Those of you who have sent commentary, you know who you are, and perhaps try and avoid confusing my simple mind by sending the same message twice. But there are some interesting commentaries coming back and things that we need to think about. But this is an invitation to say that you are welcome to make submissions. What I would like to do is bring this to a closure this year. And so I've set a date of September the 18th, in other words, a month from now, for feedback. And then we'll be looking at getting it out probably for the November general meeting. We'll make that a special meeting with the purpose of presenting you and seeking your approval for a new constitution or a revised constitution. Thanks. So I've got comments from Sam. Yes, we've got your comments on individual membership from the NPA. Thank you very much for that. That was noted, and it's in my big basket of to-do things when we've gathered all the comments together. Now, I just noticed, I did mention there that I'd skipped an agenda item. I noticed John had just privately texted me there to say, did direction and priority item, did I unintentionally skip it? That's very polite. Yes, I did. I just skipped over by mistake. So everyone happy with that little summary of where we're at on the Constitution revision? Maybe a little show of hands, just see if you're still awake. There's some thumbs up, some real thumbs up. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, excellent. I will step back. Direction and priorities of Bushwalking New South Wales 2020-21. Call for suggestions from the members. Now, the context of this is that when I became the president, I inherited I had seen a little bit of it happening, a long-running effort to try and update our strategic plan. And part of that is to get a sense of directions and priorities from the members. So again, this is a call for inputs and suggestions. You know, what are the really important things that Bushwalking New South Wales could and should be doing? And I would say, from your point of view as clubs, to support. That's ultimately our job, is to support your ability to run a good and effective bushwalking club. So there's an opportunity here if you'd like to type in anything into the chat group, or again, please take up my invitation, take it back to your clubs, take up my invitation to send us suggestions if there's something that you really feel that an organisation such as Bushwalking New South Wales could or should be doing to promote bushwalking and support you. Please will you let us know. And if you don't, we'll make something up. So we'd really like to make up something that you like. So just a minute or two if you wanted to type anything in, if you had any burning issues, the thing that. Look, there's nothing coming in, so can I put that on notice to you, ask you to take that back to your clubs. Just if it's a one-liner, fantastic. If it's a thing you've got to be in your bonnet about, let us know. It's really important that there's no point in us sitting in the committee and making something up if it's not going to help you as clubs achieve the things you really want to achieve. I haven't put a deadline on that one, but we'll get back to you in due course. Sam has suggested coming out of COVID restrictions, other enhanced risks, bushfires. Two really topical and high profile issues. Sam, thank you for bringing that to attention. Yes, what does a post-COVID world look like? Every organization I'm involved with is puzzling over this, and you're quite right that we need to give that some thought. It certainly wasn't on the strategic directions agenda last October when I started seeing it. So thanks for that. We'll make a note of that and put it in the list. Okay, now, lucky you, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to hand over to Keith because we've come to the point in the AGM where we need to declare all the positions, the 4 office bearers, President, Vice President, Secretary and Treasurer are open, and the ordinary committee members, i.e. the membership of the Management Committee, I'll declare them all open, and Keith will run the election, which will start with a call for nominations. And I'll pass over to you, Keith.
Thank you, Bill. Well, that makes me the returning officer, so all positions are declared vacant, of course, and we'll call for nominations. But just before that, I'll remind you that this is an organisation where the clubs are voting for their representatives, but anyone who's a member of a bushwalking club can step forward to be part of the Committee for Bushwalking New South Wales. So I'll call for nominations for President. I did ask whether written nominations had been received. None were received. I'm calling for nominations for President. Now, I do know that Bill was probably happy to stand, but I need a nomination.
I'm happy to nominate Bill.
The seconder, yes, please.
Yep. We've got Margaret in the chat box and Matt, thank you. Look, I'm happy to accept that nomination.
Happy to see you in the position. But I'd like to be sure that nobody else wants to stand. It's one of those unlikely requests, but all right. I've asked for nominations a second and third time, so it looks like people are very happy with you to continue as President, Bill. Many thanks.
Thank you very much.
Vice President. Nominations for Vice President, please.
That just indicates my willingness to stand, but I'm not obviously not nominating myself.
All right, thank you, David. There's a man who has performed the task this year. Could he have a nomination and a seconder, please, so he can continue that task?
Looks like
we've got Margaret and John.
Matt McClellan is either mover or seconder. Who else?
Diane Terry.
Good.
I was just pointing out, yeah, I think we already had them. So Margaret seemed to got in first, and then John.
Well, Diana Terry, let's acknowledge Diana. Thank you for seconding David.
I'm assuming that our secretary or outgoing secretary is keeping up with minutes. So other persons who nominate for Vice President. This is an easy job in many ways. the president's the one who does all the work. You're just there in case he doesn't turn up for a meeting. So it's one of the easier jobs on an executive. All right. I've called for nominations a second and third time. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Bushwalking New South Wales puts their trust in you.
Thank you.
All right. Secretary is the next nomination on my list here of the agenda. Could I have a nomination for secretary?
That was a bit quick, Matt.
Matt, that was.
You must have been waiting. All right, so I've got a nomination.
Oh, and David Springthorpe has seconded. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder?
Right.
So Matt proposed Bruce, David Springthorpe seconded it, and also John Gray seconded. So
strong commendation for our secretary.
I'm happy to continue. I've moved from a position of reluctant secretary that picked up the job after the last AGM to I'm happy to keep doing that.
Thank you, Bruce. So I should give everybody else a chance to do this task. Not an easy one, and it's always good to have a person as capable as Bruce. Any other nominations? Thank you, Bruce. Bushwalking New South Wales obviously supports you as well. Treasurer is the position I need to fill now. We've had a very competent treasurer this year. I'm hoping he's prepared to stand, but I'll need nominations and a suggested alternative treasurer if somebody else wants to stand.
Thank you, Matt, for nominating Peter.
I've got a mover and seconder.
Margaret, thank you.
All right, so I can give a commendation for Peter's work. He seems to have straightened out our accounts very well. There was no suggestion that things weren't being done properly, but the information wasn't being presented well. So Peter's done a good job that way. All right, second and third chance come and gone to step forward. Thank you, Peter, to step forward as treasurer for the coming year. Now, the next bit is a good chance for ordinary members of the bushwalking community to be involved within Bushwalking New South Wales as a committee member, so a less demanding task, but you're able to put input from your perspective as the bushwalking movement, and I need 3 to 7 ordinary committee members. Can I start with some nominations, please?
Matt nominates Keith Maxwell. Peter Jack nominates Margaret Clavey.
Last year, Matt. I'm not standing this year. He's surprised.
I perhaps might just interrupt here that much as we'd love Keith to continue, he's a busy person. He did let us know some time ago that he's wasn't intending to continue on the membership, but I don't think we'll see the back of him. I think he's going to be involved in other things. So don't be alarmed if he's not standing. He's going to be contributing, I'm quite certain. You know, just before we get on to the voting, I'd just like to acknowledge my thanks for Keith. I didn't know him before this time last year, and I've enjoyed his company and contributions greatly.
I'm calling for, have I got any nominations so far?
You've got Margaret Covey and Peter and myself. David Morrison has seconded Margaret, which should...
Good. So yep. Margaret's been a good worker for Bushwalking New South Wales in the past, and a past president and secretary, and current public officer, I think, isn't it, Margaret? So, important task. All right. So, more ordinary committee members.
We've got Matt saying ties. Are you there? Would you be interested, Ty?
Ties.
Ties.
No, thanks, she says. So Margaret's nominated John Gray.
Yeah.
As Bill has as
All right.
well.
So
Nominated John
John's
Gray.
been a good worker this past year as well, but some fresh faces would always be good.
Yes.
And
look, maybe I can put a plug.
Positions.
Yeah.
These are give colour to that committee as the helpers to make sure that the committee is working on the right track. So
yeah. And perhaps I might make a little plug, as many of you know, that I wasn't intending to be president, but it fell upon me for the simple reason that I didn't turn up at a critical meeting at a time when the Constitution had a device that nobbled me. And I have to say it's been wonderful. The committee's working well. There's enough to keep us occupied and not too much. And there's a sense that we are doing something worthwhile for the community of bushwalkers in New South Wales. I would encourage anybody who would like to even just get an insight into what we're doing to join us. You bring whatever skills you have, and it's quite a diverse group, and you can do really as much or as little as you are able to contribute. So the very fact that I'm happy to stand again says a little bit of something about the committee and the organisation, I think.
And the other members also standing, so good group.
Yeah.
Feel free to express an interest, and I'm sure you'll get a nomination.
Come on, bushwalkers have never been shy. Les, Les. Les, you're there somewhere? I think I saw.
Yes,
are
he's
you
on the
interested?
right of my screen.
Yeah. And an irony is now with COVID and we have to do Zoom meetings, it's easier to be a committee member of this organisation. It's less travel commitments.
I can unmute you, Les. I've unmuted you also, Les.
No, it's all right.
So, that was a successful nomination, was it?
No. Where have I gone? Sorry,
right,
Frank.
yeah,
No.
I'll put you in speaker mute.
Yes, I tried to get that message. Now, I have a rather full plate at the moment and a little bit of a health issue, so I'll have to step down or decline, but thank you.
I've got Margaret and John. Another person to step forward. As I say, it's an easy task. I've done it for many years. I've got a fair idea of what's involved. What would the President like to do? Leave this position vacant and we'll fill it?
I think we will, and perhaps what I might do is invite you to, give a little thought when you go home after the meeting. As I say, the committee is running well at the moment, and members we're all busy people, we're all occupied in many things. It tends to attract people who are already engaged. So you wouldn't, if you're already engaged in your own club, you wouldn't be an unusual member. And we have an office that supports us. We have Kirsten that supports us. And as Keith mentioned, we're working on Zoom, which actually does make it easier for those of us perhaps out of the Sydney zone to get involved. So whatever skills you've got, perhaps take it away with you, think about it. We can always second you onto the committee if you think you've got something to offer. It's really anything about running an organization. All of you know that there is so many aspects of running an organization that you're almost bound to have some skill or experience that is of relevance to us. So I do invite you to consider it and get in touch. If you want to talk offline with us about it, feel free.
So look, I'd recommend that you give it serious consideration to step forward to be part of your Bushwalking Association to represent your fellow bushwalkers. I think I'm done at this point, so I stop being returning officer and pass back to the incoming president, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to those who've been re-elected. Thank you everyone for taking part in that. I noticed the clapping hands there. I appreciate that. That's lovely. And I'll just reiterate my thanks. The committee's been wonderful to work with. I think we're finding our feet. I think largely all relatively new to it. We did have Margaret and Keith to guide us with their long experience. And I do just reiterate my invitation to you that if you feel you've got something to contribute, you see material coming out from us and you might think, oh goodness, they're working on the strategic plan again. That's what I do. I can help. Just get in touch and we can engage you. And the more, the merrier. Okay, I would like to pass over to Kirsten at this stage.
Great, thanks. Let me see. Thanks, Bill. I just wanted to very briefly thank all the volunteers who make Bushwalking New South Wales actually function. I simply do coordination of everybody's work, and it's been great to have a committee who have been so committed this year. And so if I can actually, I think you've seen them all tonight, all the committee members, and so I'll just see if I can actually list them up here in their clubs for you, as well as our volunteers. So thank you firstly to Alex, our first president this year, as Bill mentioned, and also thanks to Bill, our president, and our committee members, David, Bruce, Peter, Keith, Margaret, and John. And also I'd just like to mention our volunteers who aren't as, who work behind the scenes to do things to keep the organisation running. So Leonie Bell, who does our website content, Justine Burke, our newsletter editor, Navamita, who's on the call tonight, who's doing our admin, and so she'll reach out to you at times, and very grateful for everything she's doing to help us. Lisa Han also helped us with digital marketing. Ashley has done a bit of social media, and then Alexandra was doing our website backend. So I'll just hand back now to, so a huge thanks to everybody who helps out. Now I'll just hand over to Keith again, who's going to present the Chardon Award. So I shall stop sharing my screen. In a second.
And Keith, I will just tell you we're ahead of time. So our comments about doing the very truncated versions don't apply anymore. I mentioned before to some of you that Keith's been working with the Chardon Award for many years, and he identifies people of great contribution to Bushwalking New South Wales. And so it's really a great pleasure to ask Keith in his last formal meeting to be making the awards. So over to you, Keith.
Okay, yes, thank you. Look, I wrote some notes that hopefully won't take too long about this Chardon Award, and it's an attempt to raise the profile of bushwalking. Now, I think that bushwalking is a great activity that should be better known with a higher profile and more people going bush. Accordingly, I've nominated 2 bushwalkers in the past for an Order of Australia medal, OIM, Michael Keats and Andy McQueen. So they were both tickled pink when that came through. Over time, many bushwalkers have made an outstanding contribution to Bushwalking New South Wales and bushwalking with little or no recognition. So Harold Chardon was selected to name this award since in 1932, as I explained earlier, here you go, called the bushwalkers clubs together to form Bushwalking New South Wales, or Federation, now Bushwalking New South Wales. And they played that New South Wales Federation of Bushwalking Clubs, which we were, played an important role in the significant conservation battle to save Blue Gum Forest. So I hope you remember that every time you're there. We have a share in Blue Gum Forest, Bushwalking New South Wales, in the Grose Valley. Recently, I put a profile of Harold Chardon up on a newsletter, and I've learnt even more. So, very active man, part of the Mountain Trails Club, if you know anything about the history of that club. Each year now, Bushwalking New South Wales recognises a past bushwalker, plus a still very active bushwalker. So, in its first year, 2017, we recognised Dottie Green from Yarrawood. So, our Yarrawood man, I hope, is taking attention, who brought tremendous enthusiasm to Bushwalking New South Wales as president. In 2018, we recognised David Noble for his time on its committee, plus his exploration of Blue Mountains canyons. So this is the Dave Noble who didn't find the Wallamai pine. It's just a quirk that we have two walkers with the same name. For 2019, you've met Linda now and her great work as part of Canberra Bushwalkers and for her activism about feral horses, and we strongly support the work she's doing. The past bushwalkers we've respected or recognised from those previous years, they're up on the website. And this year, I'd like to recognise deceased man Brian Walker at CMW. I hope Brian Springthorpe, what's his name, Bruce Springthorpe, is paying attention, because he deserves to be recognised. Brian brought in tremendous enthusiasm to Bushwalking New South Wales as Secretary and President, but importantly, really, he came in as when we were at New South Wales Federation of Bushwalking Clubs and incorporated us into Confederation, so a very important role. But also, in 1993, Sydney newspapers got a little bit excited when another plane was found by a bushwalker. Brian had found a small Cessna plane missing in Canangra National Park that was lost in overcast weather that had defied aerial searches, so a bit like the Lamington search. So very special. It was a very difficult search for those pilots and co-pilot who survived, but unfortunately dropped down into Wingy Wungy Creek and perished there. So that was sad for them. But I'm moving on now to someone who I'd like to really mention, because she's well and truly worthy of recognition. Belinda is there. And I've known her for a long time, and she's taught St John Ambulance first aid to bushwalkers and bush search and rescue New South Wales since well before 2000. I had a problem a while ago. Belinda and I got together and said, when did I start doing it, Keith? And I said, I don't know. And so she's been very active in it. But also BC, as those people who've got children know, stands for Before Children. She was a regular volunteer for Bush Search and Rescue as part of a team of bushwalkers from Southern Bushwalking Club. So they were strong supporters of search and rescue at that time. But then starting in 2003, she's been the first aid officer for BSAR Nav Shield. The Nav Shield, unfortunately, with COVID, didn't happen this year, but it's been going for 30 years. Thus, she was part of the BSAR safety team and plan that included New South Wales ambulance paramedics. So, in summing up, bushwalking is a safer place from her contribution as an SNR volunteer, first aid instructor, and Nav Shield first aid officer. And she's going to hold up the award. There it is.
That's it.
Unfortunately, the camera's too small to see the lovely text on it.
Belinda, can you speak?
I can speak. So, you know, I tell my children, I say, Keith Maxwell is somebody I have known for my whole adult life. And it's true. And the other night, I found these were my parents' Ramblers bushwalking badges, hand embroidered from the 50s. And so my mother and my father, they met as bushwalkers. So I grew up hearing about bushwalking, and then in my 20s I joined Sutherland Club, and I went on the roster and did search and rescue. And search and rescue organised St John first aid courses that were taught by Grace Matz from Cave Rescue. And that was, I found my old Duke of Edinburgh book, that was about 1984, I was doing those. And then Grace encouraged me to become a St John trainer, which I did. And I've been training for St John as a volunteer for 35 years. And then, you know, had kids, did sort of things, disappeared for a while, and then ran into Keith back in about 2003, and it's sort of come full circle. So I got a lot out of being a child of bushwalkers and bushwalking, and so for me teaching first aid to bushwalkers is paying forward. So for those of you who aren't aware, Grace set the pattern. We always ran 2 courses a year, and then when I took that over, I continued that. And then about 4 years ago, there was enough demand that it expanded to run a remote first aid course. And then for the last few years, we've been running them 3 times a year. So we run a course February, there's usually one late July, August, and there should be one in November. So I'm now associated with the Scouts New South Wales division of St John Ambulance, and that's been a big good mix in that we've had people from bushwalking and scouting in the courses. And I mean, 35 years, why do I do it? I really like doing it, and working with bushwalkers is really good fun. And yeah, it's paying forward, putting back into the both organisations, scouting and 3 organisations, St John, scouting and bushwalkers. So I really appreciate this, but I also really appreciate what I have got out of being associated with Bushwalking New South Wales.
Thank you, Belinda. Look, I
yeah,
just want to do some finishing up comments, because we've now done the Chardon Award for this year, but there's going to be a Chardon Award, I trust, for 2021, and we've made very simple criteria. But we want someone who's more than just a good bushwalker within their own club. And you can see here, they've made a contribution to bushwalking in general, or bushwalking or Bushwalking New South Wales. So you've got 12 months to put your heads together and suggest someone who's done a good job as promoting bushwalking. So think about it. Who deserves recognition from your club in 2021? That's the end of my comments for them.
Thank you, Keith. That was wonderful. And thank you, Belinda. Congratulations. Every time I hear somebody talking about the sort of things you've done and others have done, it just makes me feel quite inadequate, I have to say. There's some wonderful people out there, and Belinda, you've made such a lovely contribution. And one more time, I must acknowledge Keith's work in this. He's been tireless in promoting this, along with his historical interests and his many years of contribution. You know, I don't want to give anything away next year, but you never know who might be holding one of these up. You never know. Anyway, it's time to come to a close. I've been asked by Kirsten to pick a number. And why is that, Kirsten?
Okay, so that is to present the prize for tonight, and I shall share my screen again, hopefully, to just show you the prize. But also, while I'm doing that, I'd also like to shout out a huge thanks to Keith for 40 years contributing to Bushwalking New South Wales and also Bush Search and Rescue. It's an absolutely incredible contribution. 40 years. Wow. So this is the slide I wanted to show you. This is the prize for lucky door prize for signing into Zoom tonight and joining us. And Bill is now going to give me a number between 1 and 50, which is the number of people who...
Yes, I'm popping my hand into the imaginary top hat and I'm coming out with the number 33.
33, okay. Let me see if I can find my list. I'll have to, actually, so what I will do is need to get the...
So you're all sitting there while Kirsten gets herself organised, wondering if you were number 33. And I'm not sure whether that was chronological number 33 or whether it's just good looking number person 33. It's a random process. And but one of you will be going away with a subscription to Wild Magazine as a little thank you for coming along and something to inspire further walks. Just looking at that photograph, it just makes you want to get back up into these mountains, doesn't it?
Yes. My attendees, I can't get my Excel to show.
I think what we'll do, Kirsten will contact the lucky person
who is number 33.
And all of you will have to look at the next newsletter to see if that lucky person is you. And if it's not you, well, come to next year's meeting and we'll see if we can do something similar.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
And then,
yes, sorry, Kirsten.
We have our next meetings.
Yes. Oh, good. We had an interesting discussion at our pre-meeting meeting because next year's AGM was on the 18th of August 2020. We're going to do a little back to the future thing, but I think we've sorted out time travel. So you can see our next lot of meetings. I expect we'll probably still be doing it on Zoom. I can't see things tidying up too rapidly, but I think you'll agree with me that it seems to have worked. All of you have stayed the course. I noticed nobody's dropped off during the meeting, which is all very good. And so I do thank everybody for turning up, making the time, making the effort. It's really important for an organization that the members come to meetings like this, that they get a chance to contribute. And I would just reiterate comments I've made earlier, and Keith made it. If you've got anything to contribute, just get in touch with us. The matters that I raised earlier, commentary, observations, great ideas for next year's award winner. Please be in touch, no matter how big or small or whatever you think your ideas are, please stay in touch. We can't run this without the members, and we like to think that we're there to support you. I think we are, but do respond. And let us know little things. Is the newsletter serving your members well? Is there something you'd like to see in it? Just the usual range, get engaged. So with that,
sorry, before
did
you
have one more thing? Sorry, Kirsten.
Yes, one more thing. Alex has asked if he could make a comment.
Alex, yes.
Hi. Thanks. I just wanted to make a brief comment. I for those that, as Bill mentioned, I was previously president of Bushwalking New South Wales for a period of time, a role which I thoroughly enjoyed and learned a lot from. During the last AGM to this AGM, one way to put it would be to disappeared. It wasn't ideal, but it was one way in which I was able to cope with the scenario I was in. And I'd just like to really thank the committee for continuing on as they did. I really appreciate what you've been able to do, and apologise for any additional headache that may have caused. I'd also like to just thank Keith and just Maxwell, and it's very sad to see you go from the organisation. I know that you said last year that you would be stepping down. I didn't quite believe it when you said it, but you know, you've just been a great source of consistency and inspiration for what people can do when they are passionate about organisations and contributing. So I just want to thank you and the rest of the committee, and Kirsten, our executive officer. So thanks. That's it from me.
Great to hear from you, Alex.
You too, Keith.
Thanks, Alex. That was lovely, and I wish you well in everything you're doing now. Thank you for those comments.
And
okay,
I got up the spreadsheet, and it happens to be Peter Conroy, number 33.
Peter Conroy. So well done.
Yes, I'll put everybody on for the applause.
Yay! Lots of claps and thumbs up. Well done, Peter. And commiserations, everyone else. You just have to come back this time next year to get whatever we can give you. Well done, Peter. Okay, with that, I'm going to close the meeting. I'll thank you all for attending.